What if you could lead more effectively and go home on time? Welcome to the Lightbulb. I'm Zoe Thompson, leadership and performance coach, and each week I bring you 3 practical insights from my work helping impact-driven leaders transform from reactive to intentional leadership so they can finish work on time and take guilt-free time off, creating success that feels as good as it looks. Let's jump in. Episode 15, and I feel like I maybe should have done a vocal warm-up before stepping in to record this because I have been deep in planning for the last couple of weeks. Now, I did this with clients in the community last week. I'll touch on that a little bit more in this episode, but it was my turn today, and you have heard me say before, and for those of you that know me and have worked with me, you will know that I love to jump in with 2 feet. I love to roll my sleeves up and get involved. I am not so great at sitting down and doing the planning, but I am getting better at it. And I am finding that the more time I put into planning, the easier my months are. And actually, the more successful my months are, which is good. So January was a great month, and I definitely want to replicate that in February. So I have spent time this morning going through and using the prompt that I shared with clients in the community last week, using that prompt, going back over the data that I have for January, answering some questions to help me with the actual things that worked, the things that didn't work, the things that felt good, the things that didn't feel so good. And I've used the PIPS framework and the AAA framework to be able to do that. And that's what I shared with clients in the community last week, was the frameworks that I use to help me with my reflection, my review, and then that data then goes into the planning. And it was my turn today. So I have been deep in that for quite a few hours today. It was really nice just to have that uninterrupted time to be able to do it. And everything is now mapped out. The tasks and activities are all now Google Tasks mapped out over the next couple of weeks. Priorities are clear. The work that needs to be done is all lined up. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this month. And I mean, I don't want to do the British thing and mention the weather, but I mean, come on now. How many more days of rain and grey could we have? Roll on the spring. Anyway, let's get into why you are tuning into this podcast, because you definitely didn't dial in to hear me talk about the British weather. So let's get into the first light bulb. And it's talking about structure and the structure and the routines that we need to have the level of success that we are trying to achieve. And so really that comes into the planning. And for a lot of people, the structure that they need already exists. They're just not protecting it fiercely enough. And this was one of the light bulbs. I mean, it's my light bulb, but certainly my client's light bulb last week, recognizing that sometimes we need to make small changes, those 1% incremental changes that will help us to get to where we want to get to. Sometimes we need to make significant changes. Sometimes we need to shake it all up and bounce it around. And like the phoenix from the flames, we need to burn it down so that we can start again. And knowing which one it is and which one to use can make all of the difference in achieving what we want to achieve. So the conversation that I had with my client last week was, we've been working on small changes. We've been working on incremental changes. And those changes have been making a difference. They have been making improvements. They have been moving things in the right direction. And actually, it's got this client to a place where they are now ready for more. They're ready now to make some bigger changes. They're ready to make changes that to them feel a little bit more risky. They feel risky because it's new, it's unknown territory. And when you are already successful, stepping into something that is an unknown territory feels scary because there are so many unknowns and there are so many variables, and we don't know what we're stepping into. And we also don't know how we're going to react and respond to that. So actually, sometimes making incremental changes to just tweak things, to make those small wins, to be able to start to kind of move the needle a little bit, but in a way that feels safe and that feels secure. And now that this client has done that, they're now ready to make those bigger changes because the structure is in place to know and give them that sense of security that actually they can make those bigger changes now because the structure is in place to support it. But actually, they need to make some bigger changes to get the outcome that they're looking for. That it also means that they're going to need to fiercely protect the structure that they have in place to make sure that it all works. So we had a conversation in the session around improving organization, reducing that reactive workload that will then help them to have more capacity to work on the strategic stuff. Now, when we do that, we recognize that sometimes there can be the risk of a negative impact on what is working really well. So what we talked about in the session was looking at the structure that was in place, looking at structure of their team, what was in place in terms of their routines, in terms of the rhythms of the way that they were working, in terms of their systems, their processes, the technology, the culture, the behaviors of all of their team. What did they have in place that would create that safety net around what they wanted to protect, and making sure that they had that structure in place to keep that safe, to keep that secure, so that they could make the changes to their way of working and to their area of the business that would get them where they want to go. So there is some fear. There is some fear around what might be lost as a result. We need to focus on what's not changing. We need to focus on what is staying the same and what we have in place that is going to protect the things that are most important. Change always comes with an element of risk because we're stepping into the unknown. But if we can identify what is still staying the same, then we can identify actually, if this is changing, what are the potential impact? What is the desired impact, and what is the potential undesired impact? What do we know? What don't we know? And what sits in that space that we need to make sure we spend some time looking at? But actually having that routine and structure in place to protect what is most important allows us to create that change on the outside. So with any decision making, we're going to have lots of knowns. We will also have lots of unknowns, and we will have the intended consequences, and there will be unintended consequences. And we want to be able to respond to those as and when they arise, but we don't want to not make change because there is a risk that that will happen. If we know that we've got the structure in place and we know that that structure is going to protect what is most important, then that creates that safety net for us to be able to create that change, to evolve our own work, our own leadership, and our area of the business as well. Second light bulb, totally different topic. Another great client session, and we were talking about their approach. We were talking about their desire to be authentic. And I know we hear this phrase bounced around a lot. And I think for many people, there is a concern that if they step into a room being who they are in the way that they are, that it might impact their existing level of success. Now, interestingly, we were talking about where does this belief come from? Where do we hold these beliefs? Why do we think that we need to tone down who we are or dial down who we are when we get to a particular level of success? These are always conversations with very successful people who have achieved a lot in their career and in their personal lives. And yet, as they get more successful, as they get further up the career ladder, they find themselves trying to tone things down and dial things down and start to just really kind of numb who they are and what's most important to them and how they like to engage and respond to people. So we were talking about the leading with warmth and following with competency. Now, I first saw this in a book by Vanessa Van Edwards. She is a specialist around body language and charisma, and very, very interesting. She's done quite a few podcasts of late. She's done a couple with Stephen Bartlett. Whether you like him or loathe him, the things that she talks about in that podcast are very interesting. And I would certainly recommend her book, which is called Cues, which talks about the importance of body language. And in that book, she talks about warmth and competency as a matrix. And she talks about how certainly leaders that have the most charisma, that are able to lead with their character and with that trust and with that rapport, they lead with warmth and then follow with competency. It is not the other way around, which interestingly, for a lot of people, when we get to a certain level and we're in new situations, we're in new scenarios, we feel that we have to prove the competency first. Now, what that often means then is we leave our warmth at the door because we are so intent on proving our competency, proving our credibility, proving our ability, that we leave our character and our attributes and all the things that make us us at the door. So this is what we were talking about in the client session. And the industry that this individual was talking about is actually quite a well-known industry. It's not the creative industry, but it is quite well known for people being who they are. There's quite a high tolerance for authenticity. And so I asked the question, okay, what is it that holds you back? What is it that you recognize, that internal dialogue that you're going through at the moment, that is telling you that you need to leave your warmth at the door and who you are at the door? And we had a great conversation around it. And I think this will resonate with certain people listening to this. But certainly I'm not, and I'll speak from my experience rather than sharing my clients, because I don't have their permission to do that. But certainly from my experience, in the late 90s, when I joined the police, there were people at the top in the chief officer group, and they all were very similar. They were very similar in terms of the demographic. And I didn't see, at the age of 18, I didn't see people in the chief officer group who looked like me, who spoke like me, who saw the world like me, who were approaching life like me. Now, that then meant in some way in my brain that connection of I need to be a certain way to achieve a certain rank or a certain level on the career ladder. Now, fortunately, as I progressed into leadership, other people got promoted and the chief officer group did start to change. And I did start to see more women in there. And I did start to see more women that I could feel connected with, or that their way of leading was the style of leadership that I liked and that I identified with, and that for me was aspirational and inspirational. But that belief takes a lot to smash when you have gone through a period of time where you only see certain people around that top table. It's very hard to kind of really discredit those beliefs and leave them at the door unless we are consciously challenging them. And unless we also become part of that challenge. So part of our responsibility as a leader is to be who we are and to show up with warmth and competency so that other people who relate to us see that that level of success is possible by being who we are. It also means that we're leading in a more aligned way. It's much more in flow with who we are as a person. So certainly from an energy level, it's going to be much easier for us to lead in a way that works for us rather than trying to mirror somebody else's approach or, putting that mask on when we go into work. We definitely don't want to be doing that. Leading with warmth and then follow with competency is a great leadership skill to have. And the reminder for me and the light bulb is that we need to make sure that we don't do that, firstly, day to day. Secondly, when we are in an interview scenario or we have a presentation or an important meeting, or we have the opportunity to have a conversation with somebody more senior, that we don't leave that warmth at the door in the effort to prove our competency. Being charismatic as a leader is a huge strength, and leading with warmth is really important. And we've talked about this in more recent workshops. Leadership is changing. We recognize that actually what people want from leadership isn't all about credibility and experience and expertise and qualifications. Actually, it's the ability to lead people. And warmth first helps to build rapport. It shows that enthusiasm and your passion. It helps to create connection. It also helps to create psychological safety. And then the competency lands because people already trust you. They're already seeing what you're able to do, but they're also liking you and wanting you to do well. They want to go where you lead them. They want to follow, but they also want to be a part of what you are building. So this isn't about being less professional. Absolutely not. It is still being strategic, but warmth is going to open doors for you. Competency will keep them open. It's going to keep that conversation going. It's going to keep you in the room, but you do need warmth to open those doors. So just a gentle reminder for you listeners this week is not to get too caught up in trying to prove your competency. Lead with warmth and allow the competency to follow. Okay, light bulb 3, rewiring your brain when you hit this new level of success, and actually noticing when the wiring that you have in place at the moment isn't allowing you to scale. Actually, it's holding you back. And I hear this from people all the time. I've talked about this from different lenses, different perspectives in previous episodes of the podcast. But actually, we need to recognize sometimes that the wiring that we have is no longer helping us, and we need to rewire for us to get to that next level. And notice this a lot with leaders, especially when you go from the more tactical leadership roles into the more strategic leadership roles. You are wired to work in a certain way, and that wiring has helped you to be incredibly successful. It's got you to where you are, and now we need to rewire to help you to get to that next level, to help you to be able to lead at this strategic level. The scalability, like the way that you approach this, is important, and it's recognizing that this is probably happening on a subconscious level, and so you may not even recognize where these behaviors are being led by old ways of working and that old mindset. And what you'll find is that you'll keep hitting the same patterns of behavior, which keep bringing you the same results, and that is what you want to disrupt. You're looking for a pattern disrupt here to help you to try something different, try something new, because you want a different result. So as an example, if you've come from a role where you have been more tactical as a leader, you're used to making very fast, quick decisions and getting involved in implementing those decisions. So that wiring is hard and fast. So your neurological pathway is now hardwired. This is what success looks like. This is what good looks like. Being equal to your team, being part of the team, being loved and respected by the team, that is what good looks like. That's what helped you to be successful. That's what a good leader looks like. At this next level, that's what creates a blocker. And so you don't want to be part of the team. You don't want to be liked. You now need to be respected. You need people to respect the decisions that you're making. So how you show up, how you engage is going to be very different. This isn't now about you walking the path with your team. You're clearing the path for your team to be successful. You're not fixing the problems. You're helping your team to identify the problems and implement the solutions with your guidance and with your support. You are not doing this for them. This isn't a tactical response. This is about you. Use the expression again, being on the balcony, being able to look out into the future, to horizon scan, to see where the problems are coming and be able to clear the path so that they can perform at their highest level. Still with guidance, still with support, but not hands-on. So recognize where your old wiring is not helping you, and where do you need to rewire? Where do you need to upgrade so that you can work at this next level? And these are hard habits to break. These are patterns of behavior that not only have served you very well for a very long time, they're also ones that probably align very much to your values, very much to your needs, and so part of your identity. And if this is something that you are finding more of a challenge, have a look back through previous episodes, because I have talked about this before in different ways. Or reach out, pop me a message, let me know where you're recognizing the blocker is, and I will do my best to support you or signpost you to some resources that are going to help you with that. You cannot scale without the rewiring. It needs practice to make this permanent. We need to recognize what those old patterns are that we want to change before we can change them. So we have to have that awareness of what is no longer working. Then we need to identify what we want to do instead. And then we can start on that behavior change and the belief change that is going to enable that to happen. Okay, those are my 3 light bulbs for this week. There's lots in there, 3 very different topics as well. So hopefully lots in there that is of useful to you. I would love to hear what you're picking up on out of the light bulbs from this episode. And if there's anything that you would love me to share more of, I would love to hear from you. Other than that, I am going to wish you a fantastically successful February. I will be back next week for the next episode of The Light Bulb. And those are your 3 takeaways for this week. Before you go, ask yourself, what's my light bulb moment from this? And now that I know what I know, what will I do differently? Choose one action, however small, and commit to it. That's how overwhelmed and reactive becomes aligned and intentional. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week on the next episode of The Light Bulb.